Hey guys, Sam from Manfa's Makes, and happy weekend to you all. Thank you for coming back yet again, and hello to any newbies. This is my weekend segment that I do every Saturday and Sunday, where I read you stories from this book, Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. So, if you haven't seen the videos previous to this, sorry, it's very early here and I am very tired still. If you haven't seen the other videos in this playlist, then please do go back on my channel. They are all linked there for you. So what I normally do, because these stories are fairly short, is I normally read you two at a time. I have been told that a lot of you guys across the pond love my accent, and it was suggested that I start reading stories. I have also got a playlist that I did a little while ago where I read you The Wizard of Oz, so please check that one out as well if you wish. So, shall we get into it? We are on story 11, Little Brother and Little Sister. Some of these stories are a little dark, and some of them I struggle to find the meaning to. But they are stories that I am not familiar with, and we are just going to work our way through them. Any viewpoints that are in these stories are not necessarily shared by me. I am literally just reading the text as it was written all those years ago. Whether they are relevant to today or not is up for personal perception and other people's viewpoints. So just a little disclaimer that I don't necessarily share the viewpoint of the authors. Okay, so like I said, chapter 11 or story 11, Little Brother and Little Sister. Little brother took his little sister by the hand and said, "Since our mother died, we have had no happiness. Our stepmother beats us every day, and if we come near her, she kicks us away with her foot. Our meals are the hard crusts of bread that are left over, and the little dog under the table is better off, for she often throws it a nice bit. May heaven pity us, if our mother only knew. Come, we will go forth together into the wide world." They walked the whole day over meadows, fields, and stony places, and when it rained the little sister said, "Heaven and our hearts are weeping together." In the evening they came to a large forest, and they were so weary with sorrow and hunger and the long walk that they lay down in a hollow tree and fell asleep. The next day when they awoke, the sun was already high in the sky and shone down hot into the tree. Then the brother said, "Sister, I am thirsty. If I knew of a little brook, I would go and just take a drink. I think I hear one running." The brother got up and took the little sister by the hand, and they set off to find the brook. But the wicked stepmother was a witch, and had seen how the two children had gone away, and had crept after them stealthily, as witches do creep, and had bewitched all the brooks in the forest. Now when they found a little brook leaping brightly over the stones, the brother was going to drink out of it, but the sister heard how it said as it ran, "Whoever drinks of me will become a tiger. Whoever drinks of me will become a tiger." Then the sister cried, "Pray, dear brother, do not drink, or you will become a wild beast and tear me to pieces." The brother did not drink, although he was so thirsty, but said, "I will wait for the next spring." When they came to the next brook, the sister heard this also say, "Whoever drinks of me will become a wolf. Whoever drinks of me will become a wolf." Then the sister cried out, "Pray, dear brother, do not drink, or you will become a wolf and devour me." The brother did not drink and said, "I will wait until we come to the next spring, but then I must drink. Say what you like, for my thirst is too great." And when they came to the third brook, the sister heard how it said as it ran, "Whoever drinks of me will become a deer. Whoever drinks of me will become a deer." The sister said, "Oh, I pray you, dear brother, do not drink, or you will become a deer and run away from me." But the brother had knelt down at once by the brook, and had bent down and drunk some of the water, and as soon as the first drops touched his lips, he lay there a young deer. And now the sister wept over her poor bewitched brother, and the little deer wept also, and sat sorrowfully near her. But at last the girl said, "Be quiet, dear little fawn, I will never, never leave you." Then she untied her golden garter and put it around the fawn's neck, and she plucked reeds and wove them into a soft cord. With this she tied the little beast and led it on, and she walked deeper and deeper into the forest. And when they had gone a very long way, they came at last to a little house, and the girl looked in, and as it was empty, she thought, "We can stay here and live." Then she sought for leaves and moss to make a soft bed for the fawn, and every morning she went out and gathered roots and berries and nuts for herself, and brought tender grass for the fawn, who ate out of her hand, and was content and played round about her. In the evening, when the sister was tired and had said her prayer, she laid her head upon the fawn's back. That was her pillow, and she slept softly on it. And if only the brother had had his human form, it would have been a delightful life. For some time they were alone like this in the wilderness, but it happened that the king of the country held a great hunt in the forest. Then the blasts of the horns, the barking of dogs, and the merry shouts of the huntsmen rang through the trees, and the fawn heard all, and was only too anxious to be there. "Oh," said he to his sister, "let me be off to the hunt. I cannot bear it any longer." And he begged so much that at last she agreed. "But," she said to him, "come back to me in the evening. I must shut my door for fear of the rough huntsman. So knock and say, 'My dear little sister, let me in,' that I may know you, and if you do not say that, I shall not open the door." Then the young fawn sprang away, so happy was he and so merry in the open air. The king and the huntsmen saw the pretty creature and started after him, but they could not catch him, and when they thought that they surely had him, away he sprang through the bushes and could not be seen. When it was dark, he ran to the cottage, knocked, and said, My little sister, let me in." Then the door was opened for him, and he jumped in and rested himself the whole night through upon his soft bed. The next day the hunt went on afresh, and when the fawn again heard the bugle horn and the ho-ho of the huntsman, he had no peace, but said, "Sister, let me be, I must be off." His sister opened the door for him and said, "But you must be here again in the evening and say your password." When the king and his huntsmen again saw the young fawn with the golden collar, they all chased him, but he was too quick and nimble for them. This went on for the whole day, but at last by the evening the huntsmen had surrounded him, and one of them wounded him a little in the foot, so that he limped and ran slowly. Then a hunter crept after him to the cottage and heard how he said, "My little sister, let me in," and saw that the door was opened for him and was shut again at once. The hunter took notice of it all and went to the king and told him what he had seen and heard. Then the king said, "Tomorrow we will hunt once more." The little sister, however, was dreadfully frightened when she saw that her fawn was hurt. She washed the blood off him, laid herbs on the wound, and said, "Go to your bed, dear fawn, that you may get well again." But the wound was so slight that the fawn next morning did not feel it any more, and when he again heard the sport outside, he said, "I cannot bear it, I must be there. They shall not find it so easy to catch me." The sister cried and said, "This time they will kill you, and here am I alone in the forest and forsaken by all the world. I will not let you out." "Then you will have me die of grief," answered the fawn. "When I hear the bugle horns, I feel as if I must jump out of my skin." Then the sister could not do otherwise, but opened the door for him with a heavy heart, and the fawn, full of health and joy, bounded into the forest. When the king saw him, he said to the huntsman, "Now chase him all day long till nightfall, but take care that no one does him any harm." As soon as the sun had set, the king said to the hunter, "Now come and show me the cottage in the wood." And when he was at the door, he knocked and called out, "Dear little sister, let me in." Then the door opened, and the king walked in, and there stood a maiden more lovely than any he had ever seen. The maiden was frightened when she saw not her little fawn, but a man come in who wore a golden crown upon his head. But the king looked kindly at her, stretched out his hand, and said, "Will you go with me to my palace and be my dear wife?" "Yes, indeed," answered the maiden, "but the little fawn must go with me. I cannot leave him." The king said, "It shall stay with you as long as you live, and shall want nothing." Just then he came running in, and the sister again tied him with the cord of reeds, took it in her own hand, and went away with the king from the cottage. The king took the lovely maiden upon his horse and carried her to his palace, where the wedding was held with great pomp. She was now the queen, and they lived for a long time happily together. The fawn was tended and cherished, and ran about in the palace garden. But the wicked stepmother, because of whom the children had gone out into the world, thought all the time that the sister had been torn to pieces by the wild beasts in the wood, and that the brother had been shot for a fawn by the huntsman. Now when she heard that they were so happy and so well off, envy and hatred rose in her heart and left her no peace, and she thought of nothing but how she could bring them again to misfortune. Her own daughter, who was ugly as night and had only one eye, grumbled at her and said, "A queen? That ought to have been my luck." "Never mind," answered the old woman, and comforted her by saying, "When the time comes, I shall be ready." As time went on, the queen delivered a pretty little boy, and it happened when the king was out hunting. The old witch took the form of the chambermaid, went into the room where the queen lay, and said to her, "Come, the bath is ready. It will do you good and give you fresh strength. Make haste before it gets cold." The daughter also was close by, so they carried the weakly queen into the bathroom and put her into the bath. Then they shut the door and ran away. But in the bathroom they had made a fire of such deadly heat that the beautiful young queen was soon suffocated. When this was done, the old woman took her daughter, put a nightcap on her head, and laid her in bed in place of the queen. She gave her too the shape and the look of the queen, only she could do nothing for the lost eye. But in order that the king might not see it, she was to lie on the side on which she had no eye. In the evening, when he came home and heard that he had a son, he was heartily glad, and was going to the bed of his dear wife to see how she was. But the old woman quickly called out, "For your life, leave the curtains closed. The queen ought not to see the light yet, and must have rest." The king went away and did not find out that a false queen was lying in the bed. But at midnight, when all slept, the nurse, who was sitting in the nursery by the cradle, and who was the only person awake, saw the door open and the true queen walk in. The queen took the child out of the cradle, laid it on her arm, and suckled it. Then she shook up its pillow, laid the child down again, and covered it with the little quilt. And she did not forget the fawn, but went into the corner where it lay and stroked its back. Then she went quite silently out of the door again. The next morning the nurse asked the guards whether anyone had come into the palace during the night, but they answered, "No, we have seen no one." She came thus many nights and never spoke a word. The nurse always saw her, but she did not dare to tell anyone about it. When some time had passed in this manner, the queen began to speak in the night and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Twice shall I come, then never more." The nurse did not answer, but when the queen had gone again, went to the king and told him all. The king said, "Ah, heavens, what is this? Tomorrow night I will watch by the child." In the evening he went into the nursery, and at midnight the queen again appeared and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Once will I come, then never more." And she nursed the child as she did before she disappeared. The king dared not speak to her, but on the next night he watched again. Then she said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? This time I come, then never more." Then the king could not restrain himself. He sprang towards her and said, "You can be none other than my dear wife." She answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife," and at the same moment she received life again, and by God's grace became fresh, rosy, and full of health. Then she told the king the evil deed which the wicked witch and her daughter had been guilty of towards her. The king ordered both to be led before the judge, and judgment was delivered against them. The daughter was taken into the forest, where she was torn to pieces by wild beasts, but the witch was cast into the fire and miserably burnt. And as soon as she was burnt, the fawn changed his shape and received his human form again. So the sister and brother lived happily together all their lives. Well, for a change, that ended up very, very well. The evil ones got their comeuppance, and the nice ones got to live happily ever after. So that story was quite a pleasant one. I'm glad you enjoyed it, or hope that you enjoyed it, should I say. Right, I'm going to have a little sip of my tea, and then we will get on to story number 12. Okay, so story 12 is called Rapunzel. I wonder if it's the Rapunzel we're all familiar with. Well, let's listen and find out. There was once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress named Dame Gothel, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, also known as Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and as she knew that she could not get any of it. She quite pined away and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't get some of the rampion which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man who loved her thought, "Sooner than let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself, let it cost you what it will." In the twilight of the evening he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it with much delight. She, however, liked it so much, so very much, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If she was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again, but when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," said she with an angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will, only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything, and when the woman gave birth, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child beneath the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in a forest and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and went by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I will at once try my fortune," said he. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as her eyes had never yet beheld came to her, but the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does," and said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in hardly a minute." "Ah, you wicked child," cried the enchantress, "what do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip snap they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. and she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair which she had kept onto the hook of the window, and in the evening when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but he did not find his dearest Rapunzel above, but the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you, you will never see her more." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did nothing but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew him and embraced him and wept. 2 of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. So again, it was a happy ever after. That is awesome. A few of the stories before those two had become a little bit dark and didn't have quite as much of a happy ending as these two. That was quite familiar, Rapunzel. Maybe a little bit of a different ending, but yeah, that was the original story of Rapunzel. So I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys did too. I will, of course, be coming back tomorrow with another couple of stories for you all. I hope that you are having a fabulous Saturday, and I hope that you will enjoy your Sunday tomorrow as well. Weekends for me are normally quite busy. I work on Sundays, but I do get some crocheting in when I do get time. So yes, I hope the weather's great. I hope you get some good time with whoever you want to, get some good crafting time in. So I will do my outro, which is stay safe, be kind, look after one another, get some good quality time in with your loved ones, and get some good quality crafty time. And I will see you in the next one or around the YouTube streets. I love you all. Thank you so much for coming by and watching, and I will see you very, very soon. Love you guys. Bye.